Hello everybody, welcome to our call this afternoon. I'm Brett Lonsdale, and this afternoon we're going to be taking a look at DeliverPoint, which is our permissions management and permissions reporting tool for SharePoint Online and also Microsoft Teams. So let's just jump straight into it. So first of all, just a quick intro to Lightning Tools. So we're a company based in the UK, established for nearly 16 years now, and for those 16 years we've been providing different products, mostly web parts and tools that address genuine gaps inside of Microsoft SharePoint, and of course now SharePoint Online and Teams as well. So of those products, we're going to be taking a look at the permissions management tool today, which is available for SharePoint on premises and also SharePoint Online as well, as mentioned. So the agenda, first of all, we're going to take a look at DeliverPoint from a sort of overview perspective. We're going to have a look at how you can report and manage permissions both contextually, so as a site owner or somebody with full control that has access to or that level of access to a site and wishes to report and manage the permissions within that site, and also that extends to site collection administrators as well. And then we can also take a look at reporting and managing permissions more centrally. So really using the tree view to change the scope of your permission report, so we could extend from within a site or a site collection to multiple sites, multiple site collections. That includes things like hub sites with its associated sites, also teams and so on as well. So that's mostly going to be demonstration driven. So we'll go through each of those different features, and this should take about half the time of our webinar today, and then we're going to jump into some of the new features that we're launching this week. So that build will be readily available for you to download as of tomorrow. So that will be version 4.1, which you'll be able to obtain either as a trial if you're looking at this product for the first time, or existing customers will be able to obtain it from the Customer Download Center as well on our website. And I'll go through what each of those new features are when we get closer to that part of the demo today. Okay, so quick overview of DeliverPoint then. So as I mentioned, this is a product that really caters for two different audiences, and that's something that's very unique to DeliverPoint. So a lot of tools that work for SharePoint Online or SharePoint on premises come at this from really a sort of governance perspective, which is fantastic. It allows IT to be able to keep a tight net on each of the different permissions and so on within SharePoint and SharePoint Online. But we also extend that based on the fact that DeliverPoint is available contextually to site owners and site collection administrators as well. And of course, they can only report and manage on those sites that they do have full control to, that do fall under their remit. The advantage of that is the fact that IT doesn't necessarily always manage permissions throughout an entire organization. That responsibility does lie with the site owner in a lot of respects. So they're creating the site, they're sharing the site with the people that need access to it, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes they will have a better understanding as to who should have permissions, of course, to the content that their team, their department are putting into that site. And whilst IT does have the ability to accept requests for access and so on, they don't always know whether they're doing the right thing, because they don't know whether a specific person should have access to that content or not. So that's where DeliverPoint really comes into its own, allows people to be able to report and manage permissions, not just at site level, but also inside of lists and libraries against multiple folders. In fact, that's a huge win over SharePoint out of the box, is the fact that you can report and manage permissions on more than one object at any one time. And that's what can be so time consuming with permissions organically inside of SharePoint. You can only report and manage permissions on a folder by folder or file by file basis, which means that people often overlook some of the permission issues that they're experiencing inside their site, or they're unaware of them. So we'll have a look at that, and then we'll jump into the centralized permissions management, where, again, as a site collection administrator or as a tenant administrator, perhaps you'll be able to report and manage permissions across larger scopes. So really, we're getting into the realms of being able to check what permissions somebody has that may be changing roles inside the organization or leaving the organization, and looking at what permissions they may have across multiple different site collections or like I say, different hubs and so on throughout SharePoint as well. So we're going to jump straight into DeliverPoint. So let's bring up DeliverPoint here. So as you can see, we've got DeliverPoint on the page, and what we're going to do is just take a look at some of those reports that we can do contextually first of all. So I'm just inside a modern SharePoint site, and just to give some contrast to what this would look like if I wasn't using DeliverPoint, of course, the site owner would be able to click the cog in the top right hand corner and come down to the site permissions. And this is typically what they see, which can be a bit misleading to somebody that isn't aware of what these permission levels mean. So we can see that we've got site visitors saying no control. And to me, I kind of read that as if to say they can't access the site, but actually means they have read access. And then we have limited control, which means they get edit permissions, which is not really that limited. And then we also have full control as well, which is your site owners. So when we create a site, we generally get these three groups created unless it's a subsite that inherits the permissions, and then it will reuse the groups from that parent. So as I drill into these using SharePoint, you will see anybody that is directly a member of those groups. So we can see we've got a demo account here called Demo User 5. We can see that they are a member of the site members group. And then we've also got the Microsoft 365 group as well, which is kind of named the same as the SharePoint group. And then we also have sales here, which in this example, sales is an Active Directory security group. And I know that's difficult to tell. If you created a Microsoft 365 group called sales, they would actually look the same as each other inside that view. One way of telling the difference is you can actually enumerate the members of a Microsoft 365 group, albeit it sort of shows you the avatars and you have to dive in a bit deeper with the show more members option, whereas you can't do that with an AD security group. So there's no way of actually seeing the members of that AD security group from within inside of SharePoint. Now, granted, we can jump into the advanced permission settings. That does give you a bit of an overview in more detail. We can see we've got some direct permissions going on here of Demo User 6 and Demo User 4. So these permissions were granted directly against the user account. That didn't show up inside that modern side panel. And beyond that, we've also got slightly different view of what's going on inside those members groups as well, but still we don't get to enumerate things like the Active Directory security groups. So there's that challenge that we're going to address, and what we're going to do first of all is just show you an alternative, which is the Discover Permissions report that we have with inside the SharePoint sites. And what we're also going to do is dive into some document libraries as well. I'll show you how you can report against multiple different files at any one time, or also multiple different folders at any one time as well, which we can do from within inside the document library, or we can also trigger those reports as well using the same handle in the top right corner of our site. But yeah, let's first of all just jump into a document library. So I'll just show you where you can see some of these different options. So on the command bar, notice how we've got DeliverPoint here. I'm zoomed in a little bit, so not all of my options are showing on the command bar, but in here you can see things like the sharing links report and discover permissions. So we'll jump into those reports shortly. And also on the files and folders, we can see those appearing on the shortcut menu as well. So we've got the sharing links and discover permissions. So what we're doing here by selecting things is setting the scope as well for our reports. So setting the scope here will be on those folders. And of course, when we run something like the sharing links, that scope would include any sub items as well. Okay, so back up to the home page, let's start off with that discover permissions. So when I run the discover permissions report, we get to see a list of everybody that is permissioned. So you can see how that differed from the out of the box report. We can see the permission level that each user has been granted, and on the far right hand corner we can also see how that permission was granted as well. So whether it was directly or via group memberships, and I'll show you some different examples of that. What I'm going to do first of all is actually just filter it, so we can filter or sort on any of these columns. So I'm going to filter it to just show me the edit permissions first of all. So you can see here that we're getting back everybody with edit permissions, and people have been granted edit permissions in different ways. So we can see Demo user 6, for example, has design, edit, and contribute. That was assigned directly. Sandy has been given full control and edit, whereas some of these other users, like demo user 4 here, has actually been granted permissions through AD security groups, and that includes nested AD security groups, which you can see here. So accounts payable is actually a member of the sales AD group at AD level, and then the sales AD group is inside the members group, and that was something that we were blind to using SharePoint out of the box. Okay, so that's the discover permissions. Each report you'll be able to also export. So that exports out as Excel, and we'll be jumping into that shortly. And there's also the ability to save as a template as well. So if we want to rerun this periodically, we can do that. And notice also that we've got the option to make changes. So by selecting a user, when I go to the account management, each of these options here, such as transfer permissions, will grab the scope that I had selected and also the user, and we can transfer those permissions to another user should we need to. We'll be getting into some of those operations in a moment as well. So that's discover permissions. So you got far more clarity contextually as to who has access to that site. Again, if I jump into a document library, you can do the same thing here. So just a reminder, you can only report on one thing at a time with SharePoint. So notice this manage access option disappears if I was to select more than one folder, whereas we've still got the DeliverPoint option. And what I'm going to do here is actually select everything inside this library, and we'll run the discover permissions. So this is running it literally on every single file or folder inside the library. And what you'll see in here, we've also got a bit of contrast between those files or folders that inherit permissions versus those with unique permissions. So notice this Excel spreadsheet here called sales revenue, that's in full color, whereas on the previous page, this Word document here is dimmed. So anything that appears dimmed is inheriting permissions. Anything that appears in the normal color has unique permissions, and that tells me that I could go through and make changes to those with unique permissions if I wanted to, or of course I could reset the permission inheritance or break the permission inheritance through the menu here as well against anything that I had selected. Okay, I've noticed one or two questions coming in, by the way, on the Q&A panel or in the chat window. And Sandy will be able to address those as we go through, and I'll be able to pick on some of those as well at the end of the webinar. So feel free to ask questions as they come to mind. Okay, so that's running the Discover Permissions report, and there's an advanced version of that Discover Permissions report as well. So these are largely sort of shortcut reports, but if I go into the main DeliverPoint page, I can access the advanced Discover Permissions report in here. And what that allows me to do is, first of all, pre-filter the report, so I can be specific about what I want to see first of all, rather than filter it after the report is executed. So there's some different filters, like if I just want to see what external users live inside this site, I could do that. Or if I wanted to look at people with a particular permission level or not a particular permission level, we could do so. And the same sort of thing on the user account as well, either by display name or any groups that they're a member of. So what we could do, for example, is say the permission level is not like or not equal to, and choose the permission level that I'm concerned with. So in this particular site, the everyone group in AD has read permissions. So what I could do is say, yeah, I'm not too interested in the read permissions. I just want to look at what's been assigned beyond that. So either doing that at permission level, or I could even do it with the permissioned via name and put the everyone group in there as well. So there's just a couple of examples of the sort of thing that I could do there. And when we trigger this permission report, we can also run it not just for this site, but also any subsites that might have unique permissions, any lists or libraries that might have unique permissions, and any folders or items that might have unique permissions. So inside one report, we're seeing everything with broken permission inheritance together, and then we could again export that if we need to. We can also include sharing links, which I've just checked, and show the folder structure for any files or folders as well. So when I generate that report, notice how we've got the site permissions, not just for Lightning Tools Sales, which is the site that I was on, but as we navigate through that, I can also see there is a subsite called Regions that also has unique permissions and is therefore showing up in here, and we can see everybody that's permissioned on that as well. And as we scroll down further, we can see any lists or any libraries that have unique permissions within inside this scope, and also any folders or files too that again have unique permissions, and you can see the folder structure being honored there as well, so we can see where these files are when we're navigating through to that library. So that's a advanced Discover Permissions report, which again we could export if we want to, or save as a template. In fact, let's do that. So let's save this as a template, and this might be a sales report that I want the sales manager to run periodically, like every month or something. So I'll call this the monthly sales permissions report and make sure that's available for anybody else with full control. And I'm just going to exit DeliverPoint here just to show you I've deselected everything. Just jump straight back into it again, and then we could go to our report templates, select the report template that I just generated, and we can generate it. So that will remember any settings that I had set, such as scope or filters and so on, and we can also go back and view or amend that report as well. So if I did want to exclude a certain permission level like read, we could go through and do that and then save it. So we've got now just everybody with anything but read showing up against those objects, which is useful. And we could also clone it as well. So if you decide that this is a great report for sales, now marketing could do with the same sort of report, we could go back into the properties on this one and make a clone of that using a different site or a different site collection, and of course name it accordingly. Okay, so a couple of very useful reports there. We've also got sharing links as well. So sharing links can occur on any file or folder, any list items, and also on entire lists and libraries as well. So it's very time consuming trying to find all those places where there is a sharing link, but with DeliverPoint, we can just pull up a sharing links report. And in here we can see what has been shared, when it was shared, and who shared it, as well as the sharing type and the permissions that are granted to people because of that. And we can also see, as we drill into these, who actually has access to those sharing links as well. And we render the people card as well deliberately, so you can actually see who the sharing link was given to. So if this was a customer or a vendor or any other external user, we'll be able to see who that user is and maybe reach out to them if need be. So we've got all of that information there too. And we can also remove the sharing link. So if there's something in here that we shouldn't be sharing, we could go through and remove that sharing link, and that will be removed immediately. So we're doing that centrally inside the site. We can also do it centrally across multiple different sites and site collections too, which we'll get into shortly. So if you're new to permissions management on a particular site, what you can do is also start off with a permissions summary. And this is something where you've got multiple options for things that you may want to include or exclude from the report. I'm just going to go through and check every single box, including this usage checkbox at the bottom here, which will tell me what sites and files have been used within this particular window of time. And you can go through and set a date if you want to. So when I generate that report, notice here we've got some summary information at the top. The scope is set to the Lightning Tools sales site, and what it's telling me is that sales site has subsites, and 2 of them have unique permissions. We also have 4 lists with unique permissions, 11 items with unique permissions, and there's 4 sharing links. And these we can drill into. So if I want to see what those unique items are, I can click that, and this is returned every single unique item, or every item with broken permission inheritance at that site level. And from here we can trigger different reports too. So we've got a commission sheets folder, for example, and that commission sheets folder has 2 commission claim documents in it. So with those 3 things selected, I could come down here to compare the permissions, and this is telling me what the differences are between those. So if I'm happy with that, I could leave it as it is, or again, I could reset the permission inheritance directly off the menu here by going to Actions and then Inherit Permissions, and just go through and run that. Okay, so so that shows me the unique objects, and again, you can drill into that to run other reports. We can also see those sort of parent objects with the most unique objects. So this library has 9 unique objects, so it's showing up as one of the most scopes with the unique objects, and likewise with sharing links as well. And then at the bottom, we've also got scopes that have the most unused sites or files. So the site itself is showing up as having 28 objects that are going unused. So nobody's clicked on them even in the last 182 days or whatever I set as my window. So we can click onto that and see what those objects are, start to pull up the permission reports and decide whether we need those objects as well. So that's a great place to begin, is with that permissions summary. Okay, so that's reporting, managing permissions contextually from within a site. What I'm going to do now is switch to the main DeliverPoint page, which we can access here from within a site, or we could also drop DeliverPoint onto a modern SharePoint page as a web part as well. And from there, you'll notice that the scope is still set to the site that I was on when I entered DeliverPoint, but we've got the advantage here where we can actually go through and change that scope. And that includes drilling down into the current site collection, so we can see all of the different child objects. So we've got subsites, we've also got the lists and the libraries in each of those sites as well. So we can get into those, we can select them, and we can report on them. So from here, we've got that same pattern going on. So anything that has unique permissions will show up as a full color. Anything with inherited permissions is going to show up as dimmed. So what we can do from this point is set my scope. So notice the scope is currently site. I could change that to site collection scope. It's actually saying team here because it's a teamified site, or we can select multiple sites. So both of those sites become the scope for my report. So partners, for example, is out of scope. So therefore, when I run some reports, it's not going to include anything about any of the lists and libraries and folders and items within inside the partners team site. But we can now discover permissions and run those other reports against multiple objects at any one time in here. Okay, so that's discover permissions at that level. Notice that you can also change the type of scope, so I can go straight to hub sites if I want to. One benefit of this is each associated site in a hub could have unique permissions. So this allows me to do things like grant permissions to multiple sites in one go. So as we come down here to account management and go to grant permissions, we can choose who we want to grant those permissions to. So I'm just going to pick on a demo user again, and we could either give them a direct permission, which is frowned upon, or we can also put them into some groups. So in here I could select the group that I want to use. Actually, it's Lightning Tools sales members, sorry. There we go. So yeah, we'll go with this one. And in there I could, if it makes sense to do so, process subsites and lists and folders and items and things like that too. So I'm just going to go back and run that, and that will put demo user 6 into that group with inside the scopes that I selected. Okay, so that's the type of thing that we can also do in terms of operations by setting the scope of our report. And another type of scope is the teams, so that will focus purely on Microsoft Teams, and then we also have an accounts view, and the accounts view is really useful if we want to pick on a particular user and have a look at what permissions may have been assigned to that user, or also have a look at things like their OneDrive permissions or OneDrive sharing links, or what site collections they're the owner of, etc. We can do all of those from the reports menu. So unique permissions is highly useful if these users likely to change role or something like that. Notice that I can see the groups that this user is in, whether they're AD security groups, SharePoint groups, or Microsoft 365 groups, as well as how they came about being a member of those groups as well. So whether that was directly or indirectly. We have site, list, and item permissions then that they have been granted to. And you'll notice that most of these objects have actually been given full control to directly, but some of the objects like the commission sheets in general, they were given those permissions through the AD security group being granted permissions. So if we want to make changes, we could again set the scope here. So the scope could be Lightning Tool Sales. So I'll choose that, and what I'm going to do is just pretend this user is leaving the organization. So I'm going to transfer permissions from demo user 4, and we're going to give those permissions to maybe demo user 7, and we can make a choice as to what else we want to affect with this action as well. So again, I could process any subsites, any lists and folders and items. We can also roll back, or have the ability to roll back this if we want to, and that could be as a safety net or deliberately, so that maybe demo user 4 was just going on vacation and demo user 7 needs to have the same permissions to cover for them whilst they're away, and therefore we want to reverse it when they do get back from their vacation. And we can also affect SharePoint groups and Microsoft 365 group memberships as well if we want to. So running this, we'll go through and transfer those permissions. So it's gone through quite a few objects here with inside that scope. And what I'm going to do is just jump back to that unique permissions report. And as I refresh this, we should see some changes. Yep, so notice that the only permissions remaining for this particular user have been granted through AD groups. And that's an important thing to point out. We don't make changes deliberately to AD groups because that could have an effect on other systems as well, not just SharePoint. So that was the transfer permissions, and what we can now do, like I say, is reverse that. So if this was a mistake or this user has come back to the organization, we can roll that back. So we'll roll back that particular job, and as we go back to the unique permissions report, let's just refresh this again. And we can see demo user 4 has their permissions returned. Okay, so that's the type of thing again we could do with some operations. So there's operations not just transfer but also copy, where the source account would retain their permissions, but they'd just be also given to somebody else. So that's useful if somebody's joining your team. You have delete permissions as well. We have grant permissions, which you've seen, and then revoke permissions. Revoke permissions is very useful if, like this circumstance here, where they've got full control, design and edit, maybe that shouldn't be the case. I want to remove some of those permissions, but not all of them. So I'm going to revoke full control. And let's just run that one. And what we should see if we jump back to that unique permissions again and refresh it is the full control has now disappeared, and they've been left with just the design and edit on that regions site. Of course, I didn't select the Lightning Tool Sales site when I triggered that job. Okay, so that is the type of thing we can do from the main DeliverPoint page through the tree view, selecting the scopes here on the tree view, and then triggering the reports or the actions that we want to perform. And some of those reports are also unique to site collections. So some of the things that we can do at site collection scope is see any unlicensed users, also any dead accounts, which means they've been given permissions, but their account is either disabled or deleted inside of the Active Directory. And we can also see all of the external users in one place, or just run a permissions summary as well at that scope as well. Yeah, you've also got the usage that you can trigger at that level also. So that's a sort of very quick tour of DeliverPoint from a central management perspective, but also from a contextual permissions perspective. And what we've also got the ability to do is do all of that contextually within Teams as well. So I'm just going to use the web app version to show you that, since I'm using my Teams desktop to speak to you. So here inside of Teams, you'll notice, just while Teams is loading, on the left hand side here, I've got the personal app of DeliverPoint. So when we jump into that personal app, we can actually have the context of Microsoft Teams whilst we're managing permissions in Teams. And of course, we've got the same challenges in Teams that we would have in SharePoint. So if somebody was to leave the organization, we perhaps need to know what teams they were a member of, and then we could potentially have the need to transfer those permissions across to somebody else. Yeah, we get the tree view in the same way. We get the same reports and the same jobs, etc., that you've just seen. Okay, so let's jump back to the slides for a moment, and we'll talk about what's new in this release. So if you've already been using DeliverPoint, you've probably been twiddling your thumbs for a moment, waiting for this moment. Yeah, hopefully for anybody that has seen DeliverPoint for the first time, that's a bit of a taster. And of course, we could do a more detailed demonstration of DeliverPoint if you need to on a one-to-one demo, which you can also schedule via our website. But yeah, we're releasing version 4.1, and I'm keen to show you what is new. So you may have, if you're eagle-eyed, picked up on a few things as I did that demonstration, but let's just jump into some of those. So first one, we've got the groups view in the Discover Permissions report now. So I'm just going to jump back into my Discover Permissions report. So this is the default Discover Permissions report that we've had for a long time, showing all the different users, the permissions, and how they were permissioned. You could have thousands of users in here and want to maybe see it a little bit differently. So that's what we've implemented. What is quite commonly a requirement is to see, well, who is a member of a particular group. So in here, what I'm going to do is just filter on the sales group. So as I filter on that, notice how I can see the users that are all inside the sales AD security group. But that's kind of not obvious to go through and do that. So what we've got now as a new feature is the ability to render by groups. And notice how that changes the report. So now we're actually seeing this report based on group first. So we're still seeing more than just the 3 groups that SharePoint would show you. We enumerate every single group that has been assigned permissions, the permission level that has been assigned to it, and what we can do is drill into those groups to actually see who's members of them. So again, even if it's an AD security group, or in this case, the accounts payable, which is an AD security group, or whether it's a SharePoint group or a Microsoft 365 group, we'll be able to see all of that, including the everyone group as well in there too. Okay, so that's a brand new feature, is to be able to render the Discover Permissions report by group first rather than user first, and then just flick that if you want to see it in an alternate way. All right, so so that is new feature number 1. What we also have is a send email when you grant permissions now. So of course, that's not new if you're using SharePoint. So using SharePoint, if you grant somebody permissions to an object, then they get an email to say they've been granted permissions, but it wouldn't happen if you did something in bulk. So what I'm going to do is just go into the main DeliverPoint page, and I'm just going to select an entire site collection, and we'll go down to grant permissions. I'm going to grant permissions to demo user 14, and just to make things obvious, I'm just going to give them a particular permission level. So we'll go with design and edit. And in here, we could also process subsites, lists, folders, and items. We could do a rollback and so on. And this is the new feature here. We can actually notify that user via email. In fact, I'm not going to be able to see that email very clearly, so I'm just going to go in and add this account, run that, So this is the account that I'm actually signed in as. So it's granting a whole bunch of permissions, which we can see here. And now I'm just going to go to my inbox. There's an email arrived with all of those permissions that are granted. So I now get the site permissions that have been granted, the list permissions that have been granted, as well as the item permissions that have been granted. And all of these are hyperlinks. So if we want to go through and see what have been granted permissions to, I can do that directly from within inside that email. So that's going to save a tremendous amount of time that user just over time discovering what they've actually been given permissions to. Okay, so another one, we have scheduled unique permissions reports. So just bear with me while I pull this one up. I just need to do a bit of trickery here in order to be able to show you this, because I'm just using a temporary certificate. And the reason why I'm doing that is because in order to use this feature, there's actually a bit of setup that needs to be done in Azure, which includes the generation of an SSL certificate. But what you can see occurs now is I've got this schedule button. And if anybody wants to go into more depth on that, we can do after this call as to what that setup is. It's not an additional purchase. If you already have DeliverPoint, you can enable schedule reports, but yeah, you do need to do a bit of setup. It doesn't necessarily have to be in Azure. It could be any server that you have access to that you would like to use, but that's basically just hosting a service that provides the scheduling functionality. So in here we've had discover permissions for some time now as a report that you can schedule, but now we've also got sharing links and unique permissions as scheduled reports. So this is useful if you do want to have a report that may be monthly or quarterly or something like that, and you just want that scheduled ability so it lands on your lap every quarter or every month, or you could also use it for something that you know is going to be very time consuming to run. So if you've got a lot of broken permission inheritance across an extremely large site collection or something along those lines, and you don't want to sit there waiting for the report to run because they are in real time, you can actually schedule it to be run here, and then you can forget about it until it's actually done. So some improvements that we've made even to the Discover Permissions report in this build means that just like the advanced Discover Permissions report, you can pre-filter it. So we could have a look at, again, all the permissions that are maybe above read or something like that. And you've also got some other settings as well, such as do you want to use include things like the unique permissions and so on, which again you saw inside the advanced permissions. In here, we get to specify a document library, which is going to be the repository for this report once it's run. If we leave that blank, it will create a document library for you. So I'm just going to leave that blank, hit schedule, and it will schedule the Discover Permissions report for me. And like I said, we could do the same thing with sharing links. So we could schedule that one as well. I'm just going to hit schedule on that. In fact, I didn't show you the frequency. Let me show you that now on maybe unique permissions. So for unique permissions, I'll run this on demo user 4. And rather than having it now, let's just make that monthly report. So we can choose the day of the month and so on that we want it to be run on. And again, I'm just going to hit schedule. Okay, so to access those, we can just simply jump down to scheduled reports, and this is where they all live. So the ones that I said now to have run, but the one that we said monthly on the first day of every month, we're not going to see that one till next year. So yeah, there you go. It's scheduled. We can see the scope, the type of report that it is, and when it was scheduled and when it's going to be appearing. But these ones here have already been created, so you don't have to navigate to that library. We can just click onto the link here, and that will open up the file for me in Excel. And one of the things that's useful to do is to just format that out as a table. And that way you can filter and everything from within inside your report as well. So again, if I wanted to see a particular user in here, we could select that user and see what permissions they've got to the different objects inside that site. Okay, so that's come through as a scheduled report, which we can access directly from here. Okay, so what's new there is the unique permissions report, the sharing links report, and the pre-filters that you've now got inside those reports too. We also have now the ability to modify an expiry date on sharing links. So a minor but useful feature. So let's just jump back here into a sharing links report. So it looks like maybe I removed some of those sharing links by doing that operation. So let's just go through and grant some. So in here, we will go against commission sheets. And let's choose share. And we'll say anybody with the link, and we'll give it an expiry of a week and apply that. Okay, so that's created my sharing link. And so running the sharing links report has now included commission sheets as having been shared with anybody. So anybody can edit. We can see the date that that's going to expire. And should we get close to that date and it's still being used, we can go through and now change that expiration. So in here, we could go through and give it another week and save that. And that's updated that expiration date on that anyone link inside that library. Yeah, useful thing. And of course, you could bring that date shorter or clear it if you wanted to as well to force it to expire. So that's the sharing link modification. We also have some export report refinements to show you. So this is, again, something that we can bring up here. So if I was to go to maybe the Discover permissions again, so every single report you can export to Excel. But what I'm going to do is just choose Export Report. So just like the scheduled report, that exports out to Excel. And what we've included here is the ability to monitor honor any filters or sort criteria that you have, but also show what settings were configured and the scope of that report as well, which you as our customers fed that back to us. Once this report was shared with somebody, you can see the site that you've got the permission report on, but you don't know whether there's more to it. So therefore, you don't know whether there was any filters set and that sort of thing, which it would now tell you on the settings tab, so you could go and see what was set in place when that report was executed. We also have, again, a minor but useful one, and this really is a sort of fixing an oversight, I guess, and that was on the advanced permissions report. So if I just show you on the standard report, if I was to filter by person, we've always had this people picker here, and you can just simply select them. But if I was to run a advanced discover permissions or maybe an advanced sharing links report, when we choose the user display name, the user email, or the user name, people were unable to find those users because we didn't necessarily know what format to type that value in on. So now you just got the picker. So we can choose the picker. Should have been there anyway, but now it is. So that improves that experience when you're using those advanced permissions reports and the advanced sharing links reports. So yeah, you're not going to get any false positives just because you couldn't find somebody by typing it incorrectly. And the last one is the folder hierarchy on sharing links as well. So if we are sharing things at subfolder level, so again, if I was to share one of these, maybe with specific people, and I'll share that with my Gmail account. There we go, and I'll hit copy, which will create that sharing link. So that is a subfolder. So now when I go into the sharing links, just show you from here to the advanced sharing links, we've got the show the folder structure for items option in there as well. So so now when I generate that, you can see the folder path just like you did inside the Discover Permissions report. You can see the folder structure, so we can see where that item actually resides. That has a sharing link on it. Okay, so they are the new features being pushed out. So quite some major ones in there, especially the scheduled reports that you can trigger, and hopefully be able to take advantage of those inside your environment as of tomorrow, as I mentioned. So I'm just going to throw out some frequently asked questions, and then I'm going to open up to some of the questions that have already been asked inside the chat window, which there are a few. So thank you for putting those in there. So first of all, just the frequently asked ones. So we all often get asked about the architecture. How's this working? What do you need to install, etc. So DeliverPoint is a Microsoft SharePoint framework package that you install. The package is basically made up of some application pages, web parts, and SPFX extensions. So all of that's packaged together in one package that you drag and drop into the app catalog. Once you've dragged and dropped it into the app catalog, you need to give it certain rights in order to do what it can do. So of course, it's reading the Active Directory security groups in order to show you what users are inside what Active Directory security groups. Therefore, DeliverPoint as an app needs to have the Active Directory groups.read permission. So things like that you will go through and grant it. And once you've done that, it's just going to show up for people. It doesn't show up for everybody. It shows up for those people that have full control to that site or to that object where you're actually using DeliverPoint. So where's your data stored? There isn't any data. So we don't store any data at all. Every report that you've seen is live data. If you schedule a report, that is in Excel format, as you've seen, inside the library, inside that site, protected by the permissions on that site as well. So, so there is no data storage outside of your tenant. There's no data processing outside of your tenant either. Everything is happening in the context of your tenant. So who can run the permission report? So I've just kind of answered that one. So that is purely based on those users with full control. If I was to access one of those sites as a different user, you wouldn't see DeliverPoint at all showing up. And then how is DeliverPoint licensed? So basically we start off with a base price for DeliverPoint, which includes 50 licenses. That's 50 SharePoint users. And that's $1,750 per year. And then it's $1.75 per user per year after that 50. So that will hopefully give you an idea as to how that is. And it's licensed on all of the SharePoint users in the tenant that would potentially show up inside of reports, etc. It's not the number of people using it, because that's difficult to gauge based on what those people have full control to that would see the product. So I'm going to open the chat window and have a look at the questions in there. If there's anything that springs to mind after this webinar, then please feel free to reach out to us directly as well. So sales team can be reached on sales@lightningtools.com, tech support on help@lightningtools.com, me on brett@lightningtools.com, and yeah, you can also tweet us as well on @lightningtools. So I think Sandy's done a great job of answering some of these questions, so I'm just going to go through and address some of the others. So yeah, there's a question here about how do we get rid of dead accounts? Great question. You just select the user and then choose remove dead account. So if I was to, let's just select a few site collections. I'm going to cherry pick here and I might get unlucky. But let's just see if we can find some dead accounts somewhere. Yeah, ish. Okay, so this is a bit of a false positive dead account, but yeah, you could select that and then remove the dead account. That's all you need to do, and it will take that user out. So really straightforward to remove a dead account. Okay, how to upgrade from 4 to 4.1. So all you need to do there is drag and drop the package into the app catalog. So you can download the package from our website, and once that's downloaded, just drag and drop it, and it will give you that new functionality. Okay, so I see Sandy's done a great job of answering some of these other ones. Yep, so another question here is, as a SharePoint farm admin, will you have access to all site collections, even if you are not specifically added as a site collection admin or a site owner? So I guess when you say farm admin, you might be using SharePoint on premises. If you are, that answers differently to that for SharePoint Online. So for SharePoint on premises, we have some additional features in there where you can actually set certain users up to be DeliverPoint auditors or DeliverPoint operators, which means that you can elevate the privileges for the account that you're signed in as in order to be able to perform permission changes and run permission reports. So you don't have to be a site owner or a site collection admin in that regard. If it's online, it's a different answer, because with the SharePoint framework, you can't elevate privileges. So yeah, you would need to have the full control permissions in order to execute that. So typically setting yourself up as a site collection admin is what's required. So you can do that from the site admin panel. I would recommend not using your everyday account, but maybe using an admin account or create a DeliverPoint user account or something like that. Make it a account that you can sign on as and then run DeliverPoint within that context of that account. And then, of course, you'll be able to report on everything if need be. Okay, so once you've run a report, have the results displayed, how can you modify the report and then run it again? Yep, so it's a good question. You've basically got the filter options at the top of the report, or you can select rows, make changes, and then from the actions menu you can choose refresh, and that will recreate the report as well. All right, so the showing how to access the accounts view again. Yeah, let me jump into that one. So the question was, how do I show the accounts view? So as I go into the main DeliverPoint, we go to there's two places you can run it at. Actually, you can run it as under accounts view. I can do a search for a particular user, select the user that I'm interested in, and then from the reports menu, it was the unique permissions report that we ran. So you have to be on that accounts view with the user selected in order for that option to show. Alternatively, you can actually choose site collections. You have to have site collections selected, and then you can run the unique permissions report and then specify the account. So in there, I could run it as demo user 4, generate that report. So it's going through multiple site collections here now, multiple sites, lists, etc., in order to be able to generate that report for me. Okay, so hopefully that's a little bit clearer. All right, I think that has addressed all the questions. If not, yeah, feel free to reach out to us again. So I'll just pull that back up. So sales@lightningtools.com for help around licensing and sales, or help@lightningtools.com for tech support questions, and then Brett@lightningtools.com if you want to reach out to me, and of course feel free to follow us on Twitter and so on. I appreciate everybody attending this afternoon, this morning, whatever time zone you're in, and The webinar was recorded, so we'll put that up on our website. You'll be able to watch that back as of tomorrow. All right, so many thanks. And this is our last webinar of the year. We are running a new one in January, which is going to be on the data viewer. So yeah, if you're interested in displaying external data inside of SharePoint with charts and so on, please feel free to register for that one. And we'll see you in the new year. Wish you a very happy Christmas, happy holidays, and of course, successful 2023. Many thanks. Take care.